Hi there and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's February 22nd, and there are just 26 days until the first day of spring. Can you believe it? Well, anyway, happy Monday. Today we celebrate an American lyrical poet and playwright who wrote some beautiful poems about flowers. We'll also learn about a Scottish surgeon who advised using sphagnum moss to treat wounded soldiers. We'll hear inspiring words about winter aconite, Euranthus hyemalis. And we grow that garden library today with a book about medicine, herbal medicine, and it's an invaluable, comprehensive reference. And then we'll wrap things up with the story of a favorite student of Carl Linnaeus known as the vulture. Fun little story. But first, let's kick things off today with curated news. Today's curated news was actually written by the garden blogger Pam Pennick, and she wrote this piece for Garden Design. The title is 8 Ways to Create a Garden That Feels Like Art. Well, in this post, Pam interviewed Craig Reynolds, the designer, and he shares his tips for creating gardens that will make you feel like you're in a gorgeous piece of artwork. One of his first tips is something any of us can do, and that is to mass it. This was the heading that he gave to this piece of advice. And all it simply means is that you plant in mass, that you group your plants by type because you'll have a more impactful look in your garden. Craig says, you need masses of things. You may have 5 or 6 species of plants and use maybe 10 of one and 20 of another and 100 of the smaller ground covers. Masses unify a textural, heavily planted garden. And isn't that a lovely way to think about organizing your garden? If you have a garden that feels jumbled and disorganized, or just doesn't make you feel restful, massing may just be the trick that you need. And pay attention to what Craig says here. He's talking about having a garden that has 5 or 6 species of plants, and that's it. So let's say you want to try this. The first thing I would do is go through the garden and edit out whatever is not life-giving. Give those plants to a friend or a neighbor, put them on the side of the road. Somebody's going to take them. And then, once you have your garden honed down, maybe you can't get to 5 or 6, but maybe you can get to 12, your dirty dozen, your favorite top 12 plants. Well, then I think you've got something. And this is where blocking your garden comes in. Take a look at a map of your garden and block out the areas where you want these core specimens to go. And don't forget, if you live in a cold climate, follow the advice that Heidi Highland gave me many years ago, and that is get your spring bloomers by your front door. After you've waited an entire winter to see something blooming, you want to put it front and center, so it's the first thing you see when you head outside. Then you can follow the advice of other garden designers like Gertrude Jekyll, who would tell you to put your hot colored flowers near a focal point in your garden and the cool colored flowers near the entrance so that you're drawn into the garden. I could go on and on with garden design tips. They're so handy. And in this article, Craig has 7 more for you. And if you'd like to read them for yourself, and I think you should, all you need to do is search for the word art in the Facebook group for the show, and Pam's post will pop right up. And if you're not in the Facebook group, don't worry about it. It is so easy to join. All you need to do is search for the words Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend the next time you're on Facebook. And then just request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. Here's today's brevities for February 22nd. Today is the birthday of the American lyrical poet and playwright Enda St. Vincent Millay, who was born on this day, February 22nd, in 1892. Gardeners cherish Edna's verses like April comes in like an idiot, babbling and strewing flowers. She also wrote, I would blossom if I were a rose. And she also said, I will be the gladdest thing under the sun. I will touch 100 flowers and not pick one. Well, as lovely as those verses are, Edna did throw some shade at the very poisonous and rank-smelling Jimson weed plant, the thorn apple, or Datura stramonium, in her poem, In the Grave No Flowers. Edna wrote, Hear the rank-smelling thorn apple, and who would plant this by his dwelling? Well, it turns out that the American botanist and geneticist Albert Francis Blakesley was especially fond of Datura. In fact, one of Albert's friends once joked that in his life, Albert enjoyed two great love affairs with his wife Margaret and with Datura, and in that order. Not surprisingly, Edna's verse riled Albert, and in response, he sent her a letter. He said, I thought I would write to you and answer your question by saying that I would plant this by my dwelling and have done so for the last 30 years rather extensively. And it turns out that this plant, Datura stramonium, is perhaps the very best plant with which to discover the principles of heredity. Now, Datura's common name is Jimson weed, and it's derived from Jamestown, the colonial settlement where British soldiers were given a salad made with boiled Jamestown weed, or what we now know as Jimson weed. For days after eating the greens, instead of quelling the colonial uprising known as the Bacon Rebellion, the British soldiers turned fools, blowing feathers in the air, running about naked, and acting entirely out of their minds. Datura's other common names, the thorn apple or the devil's apple, offer a clue that Datura is a nightshade plant. Those sinister names came about because nightshades were historically thought to be evil. In contrast, the Algonquin Indians and other ancient peoples regarded Datura as a shamanistic plant, and they smoked Datura to induce intoxication and hallucinations or visions. In fact, the etymology of the name Datura comes from an early Sanskrit word that means divine inebriation. And today is the anniversary of the death of the Scottish surgeon Charles Walker Cathcart, who died on this day, February 22nd, in 1932. During World War I, Charles and his peer Isaac Balfour wrote a paper where they advised following the common German practice of using sphagnum moss to treat wounded soldiers. After this article came out, sphagnum moss was robustly harvested for wound dressings for the British Army. The article published by the Smithsonian Magazine called How Humble Moss Healed the Wounds of Thousands in World War I shared the history of the use of moss. Here's what it said. In ancient times, Gaelic Irish sources wrote that warriors in the Battle of Clontarf used moss to pack their wounds. Moss was also used by Native Americans who lined their children's cradles and used it as a type of natural diaper. It continued to be used sporadically when battles erupted, including during the Napoleonic and Franco-Prussian Wars. And Lieutenant Colonel E.P. Sewell of the General Hospital in Alexandria, Egypt, wrote approvingly about moss, saying, "It is very absorbent, far more than cotton wool, and has remarkable deodorizing power." Lab experiments around the same time vindicated Sewell's observations. Sphagnum moss can hold up to 22 times its own weight in liquid, making it twice as absorbent as cotton. In response to Charles's advice, communities organized moss drives. A December 19, 1916 article from the Casper Star-Tribune out of Casper, Wyoming, was simply titled, "Gather Moss for War Bandages," and it read, "Thousands of women and children are daily combing the misty hills of Scotland and the Irish west coast for moss for absorbent dressings. Recently, they filled an order for 20,000 bandages. The moss is wrapped in cotton gauze and applied to open wounds." In Unearthed Words, today's words are by the author and the curator of flowering plants at the London Natural History Museum, Roy Vickery. This is an excerpt from his book, A Dictionary of Plant Lore, and this is from his section on the winter aconite, Euranthus hyemalis. When the 6-year-old Dorothy L. Sayers moved into her new home at the Bluntisham Rectory in the Fens in January of 1897, she cried out with astonishment, "Look, Auntie, look! The ground is all yellow, like the sun." This sudden splash of gold remained in her memory all her life. The ground was carpeted with early flowering aconites. Later, her father told her the legend that these flowers grew in England only where Roman soldiers have shed their blood, and Bluntisham contained the outworks of a Roman camp. So as early as this, and as young as she was, her imagination was caught by ancient Rome. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Encyclopedia of Herbal Medicine by Andrew Chevalier. This book came out in 2016, and the subtitle is 550 Herbs and Remedies for Common Ailments. In this book, you really get one of the remarkable reference books of herbal remedies. The format is exact, and the information is reliable. If you're looking to learn about the herbs that can help promote health and well-being, you have found a terrific resource here. The instructions in this large volume are straightforward to follow, and you will be able to cultivate your own garden apothecary, custom tailored to your own health. In addition, this herbal encyclopedia is easy to use and allows you to look up information either with plant names or by ailments. This book is 336 pages of a detailed herbal reference with proven natural remedies and advice for growing herbs that will be the most helpful to you in your garden this season. You can get a copy of Encyclopedia of Herbal Medicine by Andrew Chevalier and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $30. Finally, here's something sweet. to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today is the anniversary of the death of the handsome and tall Swedish botanist and a favorite student of Carl Linnaeus, known as the vulture, Per Laflang, who died on this day, February 22nd, in 1756. Per met Carl at the University of Uppsala, where Carl was his professor. Early on, Carl dubbed Per his most beloved pupil, and he even gave Per a nickname, the Vulture. Carl came up with the moniker after observing that Per had an intuitive way of finding plants and observing the most minute details of plant specimens. When Per wrote his dissertation called On the Buds of Trees, his observation skills were put to use. Per's paper featured detailed descriptions of plants in bud in the off-season instead of in full flower during the summer. This unique perspective enabled people to identify many species in the leafless winter, something that easily confounds plant lovers still today. When Carl felt Per could be a role model, tutor, and a friend to his son, he offered Per the chance to live with his family. Hence, Per continued his studies while living with the Linnaeuses. After graduating, Carl recommended Per for an opportunity in Madrid, and this is how Per learned Spanish and befriended many Spanish botanists who called him Pedro. After 2 years of collecting over 1,400 specimens in Spain, Per secured a paid position on the Royal Botanical Expedition to South America with a mission of learning to cultivate a particular variety of cinnamon thought to be superior to the standard variety. By 1754, Per was botanizing in Venezuela with a small team that included 2 doctors and 2 artists. Per was just 27 years old when he died of malaria on the banks of the Caroni River at a mission outpost on this day, February 22nd, in 1756. He was buried beneath an orange tree. By the end of that year, over half of the expedition's men would be dead from disease compounded by hunger and fatigue. And when Linnaeus shared the news about Per with a friend, he simply wrote, "The great vulture is dead." Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. Hey, thanks for spending part of your day with The Daily Gardener. If you want to read even more botanical brevities, just head on over to thedailygardener.org. That's where you can find all the stories, biographies, and books that I share on the show. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. It has lots of goodies in it, and I try to make the newsletter like you're getting a marvelous letter from a garden friend. You can always find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Twitter, and you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. Last but not least, you can easily share your gardener greetings or book submissions by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Maple Grove in Wyoming, Minnesota, with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, and Eric Begay. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.